Hello, I am going to make this video that covers one of the questions from the college algebra homework. This would be from section 1.5. So section 1.5 covers all the different ways to solve quadratics. We start with factoring, and then there's also the square root property, and then there's also the quadratic formula. So this question is question number 12 from my math lab. So you might have the same question or something similar. So this question says, find the real solutions if any of the following equation, use the quadratic formula and a calculator, express any solutions rounded to 2 decimal places. So a lot of times when we solve these problems, we actually don't have these exact instructions because they'll be ask us to maybe find the exact solution, and that is a hint that they want there might be a radical left over that we would want to simplify as much as possible, but we would leave it. However, this question has decimals already in the problem. So the equation is x squared minus 4.7x plus 2.8 equals 0. So x squared minus 4.7x plus 2.8 equals 0. So right off the bat, since there's already decimals in the problem, that is something that can be a bit of a nuisance. And then also they don't want, if the problem already has decimals, where answer is also okay to leave as a decimal. So that could be good or bad, because when we use our calculator, sometimes just getting the correct answer rounded to the correct amount, it says rounded to 2 decimal places, can be pretty annoying. So for this problem, for the quadratic formula, what we're always going to want to do first is just to label what values we're going to substitute for A, B, and C. So since the original equation was x squared minus 4.7x plus 2.8 equals 0, that means A equals 1, B equals negative 4.7, and C equals 2.8. Okay, so that's always a good idea to write down on your paper, especially when it comes time for a quiz or a checkpoint or a test or anything like that, just to let me know, okay, we have the correct values. And now we're going to use the quadratic formula, which again, I recommend, if possible, to memorize. I will supply it for you when we have like a test or anything like that. However, it's a lot easier just to, instead of having to check back and forth what the formula is and if you have it correctly written down, by just sort of memorizing it. But anyways, so we have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and this is all divided by 2a. So what we'll do first is we'll start to go ahead and substitute in our values. So for b, for negative b, we'll put negative 4.7 plus or minus the square root of negative 4.7 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 2.8. And then this is all divided by 2a, which is 2 times 1, which if a is 1, sometimes I'll just write 2 because it's one less thing we have to do. Okay, so then the challenging part from here is often a few things. The negatives cause some particular issues, and especially when we have to use a calculator to simplify this, that can be a bit of a problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the graphing calculator so that I can show you how I want to make sure we type this in, and how I recommend you simplify it. You don't have to follow these exact steps. There are different ways that students like to have to simplify these, and that's okay. But I'm just going to show you what I think seems to work the best. So first, I'm going to focus on what's inside the radical, to simplify that. Now, the most common issue is forgetting that if we are using the graphing calculator to square a negative number, we want to make sure we put parentheses around that negative number. So what I'm going to enter in is parentheses, negative 4.7, close parentheses, squared, minus 4 times a, which again is 1. So a lot of times if I have to multiply by 1, I don't even do it. So I'll just do 4 times 1, which I'm not putting, times 2.8. So I have 4 times 2.8. Okay, so what I get from the calculator is 10.89. So what I then like to do is I like to rewrite the formula. This time though, I will simplify any like signs on outside the radical. So for instance, I have negative 4.7. So I'll rewrite that as 4.7 plus or minus the square root of, and now instead of having b squared minus 4ac. I'll replace that with 10.89, and this is all divided by 2. Okay, so then what do we do from here? So again, this is a little bit different than some of the problems where we maybe would be asked to simplify the radicals, make sure there's not a perfect square factor that we could divide out. We have 10.89. So that's not going to happen. All right. So what I would maybe recommend we do from here is to go ahead and type into our calculator 2 different options. We're going to calculate what 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89 is. And then I will divide it by 2. And I will also find out what 4.7 minus the square root of 10.89 is, also divided by 2. So this can pose a different issue than some of the problems we've had before, where when we are typing in, simplifying a fraction like this, it's like, because it's all just in there, there's not really much else we can do besides calculate it. If there's a large fraction like this, you have 2 options. You can type in the numerator and then the denominator, or you can use parentheses around the numerator. Okay, so if you made it this far and you didn't maybe get the correct answer, it's probably this step here. So what I would recommend, again, I'm going to go ahead and show you the one way that I would recommend. I would do 4.7 plus the square root of, and you can type 10.89. You can also click second and then the negative sign. That will recall the previous answer. So since I still have in my graphic calculator 10.89 as the last number I typed in there, sometimes it can save some effort. Okay, so we do 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89, which is surprisingly just 8. And then we divide that by 2, okay, and get out 4. So one of my solutions is going to be 4, which I feel like is a little bit of a turn of events. You wouldn't really expect that to happen when you have a decimal in your original answer. And then I'm going to repeat the process, but for the minus. So we'll say 4.7 minus the square root of 10.89. And again, I'm going to go ahead and push enter, and then I'm going to divide by 2. And that tells me that my other answer is 0.7. Okay, or 0.7. You can really use them either way. Okay, so then for those particular questions, actually the directions said to express any solutions round to 2 decimal places. Well, actually, we don't even have 2 decimal places because our answer was 4, which had no decimal places, and 0.7. So you can just type them in just like that, and it should hopefully work out for you. So a few things that you want to make sure you keep in mind is, number 1, if you have to use your calculator to square a negative number, make sure you use parentheses. Also, something that was sort of new that you might not have had experience with for a while is that when we have to simplify 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89, all divided by 2, and also 4.7 minus the square root of 10.89 divided by 2, we want to be careful with that as well, because you could put it all in at one time. You could put parentheses 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89, close parentheses, divided by 2, or you could do how I did it, where you type 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89, push enter, and then divide by 2. The problem is if we enter it in all, it was like one line, 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89 divided by 2, how the calculator reads it is order of operations. So they'll technically just divide the square root of 10.89 by 2 and not the entire quantity of 4.7 plus the square root of 10.89. So I hope this was helpful. Again, this was from section 1.5. Number 12, your problem also is probably similar in terms of having decimals involved. So if there's ever any more questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to help explain them. Okay, thanks.